Skank for producer Keith Hudson, followed by the release of the full-length albums Screaming Target for producer Augustus Gussie Clarke, which was released in England on Trojan Records, as well as on Gussie's own labels in Jamaica, and the more hastily put together Chi Chi Run by producer Prince Buster, which did not contain entirely Big Youth tracks, but was filled out with some other artists, saw Big Youth's popularity on the island reaching a fever pitch. At one point he had 7 songs in the charts at the same time, some of them in the top positions, and displayed his lyrical dexterity, his verbosity, his willingness to mix and match subjects and topics, often within the same song, in something of a free-flowing, freestyling stream of consciousness, as displayed on the title track Chi Chi Run itself, where he goes into a bit of the nursery rhyme, hickory dickory dock, the mouse went up the clock, and Screaming Target itself, which starts out as a discussion of the latest movie he's seen before going into promoting the virtues of literacy to tie in with a Jamaican government initiative promoting literacy at that time. However, Big Youth was struggling to get the remuneration he felt was owed to him from the various producers he'd worked for. Him and Gussie Clarke would acrimoniously fall out over issues of payment, publishing rights to the songs Big Youth had done for him. Even while Big Youth's popularity began to grow, he would even travel to the US, his first trip outside of Jamaica, where he would perform at Madison Square Garden on a reggae ticket, including the harmony group the Heptones, who would eventually begin adding their harmonies to Big Youth's songs. The American audience, perhaps not quite ready for reggae at that point, hadn't quite penetrated fully yet. One reviewer at the time apparently said that Big Youth sounded like someone losing their temper inside the Lincoln Tunnel, perhaps with no awareness of the DJ craft or what it was. So even while Big Youth began to get frustrated with his DJing, want to expand beyond the parameters of what DJing was, and particularly frustrated with the money that was coming back to him. He was having all these chart successes, had fame and popularity, yet was still living in a rundown house on Princess Street in downtown Kingston. So he would continue judiciously recording for a few other producers while increasingly having his own eye on self-productions. For this era of Big Youth's career, this early phase is nicely summed up on Tell It Black, a 2000 CD from Snapper Records, the first disc of which contains a few early sides, including S90 Skank, Keep On Moving, or Moving version for Lee Perry, as well as the entirety of the Screaming Target album, with some Phil Pratt sides and self-productions on disc 2. Big Youth would begin recording for producer Joe Gibbs, one of the outside producers he would work with, beginning with a song called A So We Stay, voicing over a singer called Dennis Brown's song Money in My Pocket, which was a hit for Joe Gibbs. This would continue the association of Big Youth and Dennis Brown on his way to being acclaimed as the crown prince of reggae. Through the remainder of the decade, the two would move very closely together, like brothers, Big Youth voicing over a number of his songs. Big Youth would continue to record a few sides for Joe Gibbs, particularly commenting on the highly hyped George Foreman versus Joe Frazier boxing match, as on the song Foreman versus Frazier, and further sides like Round 2. For producer Derek Harriott, he would voice over Keith and Tex's Stop That Train as Cool Breeze on the Stop That Train rhythm, perhaps referencing in another one of the Big Youth's pop culture mix and match references, perhaps referencing the blaxploitation film Cool Breeze with its soundtrack by Solomon Burke, which had shortly come out by that point. He would also do Dock of the Bay for Derek Harriott, mixing both a reference to Otis Redding's famous song, as well as bringing in the old doo-wop standard Silhouettes. For producer Winston Riley and his Techniques label, he would record All Nations Bow on the heavyweight Stalag rhythm. His lone side for producer Vivian Jackson would be Yabby Youth by Big Youth, and its strikingly titled B-side, Big Youth Fights Against Capitalism, dub mix by King Tubbies, showing Big Youth's political consciousness and sensibilities fully on display. Jumping ahead a bit in the timeline, by 1975, one of the biggest records of the year was Burning Spear's seminal Marcus Garvey, and the crucial DJ side to that song would be Big Youth's own Mosiah Garvey, finding Big Youth in full fire and brimstone righteousness mode, declaring mode on a heavyweight track, seminal reggae DJ side by Big Youth, even at one point breaking into laughter mid-song before coming right back to the topic.
And after I enter through this door, no one else shall enter. Certain place on King Street, they say it'll be a car bomb, so it is, baby. Marcus Garvey words come to now. Really, of course. Marcus Garvey words come. I've seen it many times before. Yeah. And Mr. Marcus Garvey say, black people down here will never see themselves until they're back against the wall. Yeah, you never know yourself until you're back against the wall. Some will rise and some will fall, but black people will never know themselves until they're back against the wall. And that is what Mr. Marcus Garvey said. Yeah.
Big Youth would continue recording for other producers, as on the obscure Town Without Pity, reissued by Pressure Sounds several years ago, finding the youth very much in a US soul style. Also, Natty Don't Jester on the Impact label, being a next cut to Carl Malcolm's No Jestering, and seeing Big Youth attempting to steer the discussion at hand into a more positive Natty Dread-centric arena. There would also be Love in the Neighborhood for obscure producer Ainsley Folder on the DJ label, which was the Big Youth's DJ version to Delroy Wilson's hit Have Some Mercy, which was adapted from the US soul hit I Forgot to Be Your Lover. However, many of these recordings for other producers were done either for infusion of cash or to obtain a basic instrumental rhythm track in payment for services rendered that Big Youth could then do his own voicing over, put out as his own productions, free from the constraints of working for other producers and able to indulge his imagination and creative instincts, and a close examination of these recordings for himself sees him blossom into one of the most fertile creative talents working in reggae at this time. This is a period of his career masterfully summed up on the Blood and Fire compilation Natty Universal Dread in the year 2000. CD edition never came out on vinyl. 3 CDs of his own self-productions with detailed liner notes by Steve Barrow. Track-by-track summary. The first Big Youth self-productions would appear early in 1973. The very first one would be a song called Hot Cross Bun, backed with the more biblical River Jordan. That would appear on the dynamic subsidiary label Panther in spring of 1973, and rode Lloyd Park's Slaving Rhythm that Big Youth had used on his Screaming Target album. It would be another rhythm track that he had used on the Screaming Target album that would form one of the first releases on his own label, which he would name Nagusa Negast, Amharic for King of Kings, one of the titles of Rastafarian deity Emperor Haile Selassie I. The first brace of Nagusa Negast singles, the first run of singles, would begin appearing by summer of 1973. One of the first would reportedly be Children, Children, showing Big Youth's image on the label, Nagusa Negast, the label, and the proud logo produced by M. Buchanan on the rim, his real name. Would be backed by Mr. Buddy. throwing off some of the conventions of the time where you would have a vocal on one side, a dub or instrumental cut on the B side. Big Youth would put two vocals on the same rhythm, on different rhythms, sometimes extrapolating themes from one side, continuing on the other, mixing and blending topics. This would see him revisiting Casey White's Anywhere But Nowhere rhythm track. Anywhere But Nowhere, again adapted from a US soul hit, in this case Gene Chandler and Barbara Ackland's Anywhere But Nowhere. Casey White did the cover version, then Big Youth came with two DJ versions on the Screaming Target album as Solomon Grundy and Lee Lowe. Children Children and Buddy Buddy finds him bringing some elements of the Solomon Grundy nursery rhyme lyric back in. Children Children bringing in something, sees him narrating a somewhat humorous dialogue between a parent and a group of children. Who taught you that manner? The dog. Who is the dog? The children say, you. Before going into a bit of word salad on Mr. Buddy, coming up with nonsensical phrases such as, who dead Mr. Tenor? Mr. Tenor saw. What does it mean? Who knows? He later goes into a bit of biblical verse. One youth who heard that song at the time became obsessed with the sing-song rhythm of it, would later adopt Tenor Saw as his own stage name and make his own name in DJing.
That was it. And where was my share? That it happened to hear. See, thou can I reach it. So you climb on a broken chair. Then suppose I fall, I do not care. Said who taught you that manner? The dog. Said who was the dog? The children say you. Salamana Gonde. And he was born on a Monday. Tell you, he said on a Tuesday. So me tell him about it. Good guys. Another track from the Jose. About son of color Salamana Gonde. Scoop it, baby, lemon. About Mana Gonde, I would say. Two will be in the bed. And one will be taken away, as I would say. Said one of us is gonna weep tonight. Money miss a body, me no body for you. Hey! Who dead miss a tenor? I'll tell you. On which you tenor saw. Look at that. On which you saw buyer. I tell you. On which you buyer higher. On which you price a do. Tell you. On which you do flash. Look at that. On which you flash only. On which you lily of the. No, your wound I will say. On which you lily yellow. We should do Babulo. Look at that. Want to go to Zion. Want to go to Zion, I will say. Zion. Only Zion, I will tell you.
Big Youth's 1974 album would be boldly yet accurately titled Reggae Phenomenon, a phrase reportedly written about him in the Jamaican press. It would be released initially only in Jamaica on his own Augustus Buchanan label, another label he had set up to handle his own self-productions, just named after himself, as Trojan Records in the UK, which had handled his previous album, Screaming Target, had gone into receivership, was temporarily out of commission for releasing reggae in England. It would contain Riverton City, something of a guided tour of one of the poorest districts of Jamaica, as well as the unusual Hip Kadoo, Big Youth's entry into the canon of Jamaican martial arts themed songs at the time, the Kung Fu craze in full swing in Jamaica in the early 70s. Tellingly, Big Youth's was inspired by a film with a female protagonist called Hapkadoo. Big Youth beginning to display his pro-women stance on record, perhaps in contrast to some of his more misogynistic peers. The album would also include more of his forays into singing, including his renditions of Al Green's Love and Happiness, The Temptations' Papa Was a Rolling Stone, and bizarrely, even Tom Jones's It's Not Unusual. Big Youth showing his unfettered range of pop culture references and wide-ranging love of music, regardless of style or genre. Another of his entries into the singing part of his career would be a big hit for him in Jamaica. He had got involved with a blaxploitation film for which band leader and bass player Boris Gardner was handling the soundtrack. Big Youth would help contribute the theme song, the title song, and his vocal of that with his singing would be a big hit with one of his most ebullient vocal performances as a singer. I'll not say the title aloud, but hopefully you can read it there. A big hit for Big Youth in the early 70s. Unfortunately, the film was a flop, but Big Youth did make a cameo in it, which was apparently well received. Big Youth's regard for women would bring him into conflict with another DJ at the time called Prince Jazzbo. There had been a bit of friction between the two earlier, apparently, as Big Youth had written a song but not got a chance to record it yet, which was to be called Wise Shepherd. Prince Jazzbo would then overhear these lyrics and record his own song with the same title and some of the same lyrics. A bit of tension between the two DJs there. Prince Jazzbo would then put out a song called Cranky Bine, included on the Pressure Sounds compilation Mr. Funny, which Big Youth perceived as being derogatory to women. He would respond with his own song called African Daughters, in which he admonished the DJ for what he had said and sought to promote and uplift and venerate women. Big Youth displaying his regard for the female gender. The feud with Prince Jazzbo would reach a climax when Big Youth's friend Trevor Lego Beast Douglas would spot Prince Jazzbo walking down the street, chuck a bottle and hit him in the head with it, after which Prince Jazzbo had to boot it and hide under a truck from further physical retribution. An event that was amusingly recounted by DJ Iroy, then embroiled in an on-record feud with Prince Jazzbo on a song called Jazzbo Haffy Run.
Don't you know that it's true, that for me, and for you, slavery abolished. Don't you know that it's true, that for me, and for you, the world is a ghetto. Downtown Kingston, pollution. Every day all I see is confusion. What a bad situation. So we can't cure this pollution. Downtown Kingston, deep pollution.
It's Jayo. I would man that said the other day after. I know man, I do it with that show man.
Aye.
Yes, Jayo, that man I tell man about a true right man here Rasta. Man I call that them concubine Rasta.
Can't do that.
Yes, Rasta, I man know that one.
Them can't do that.
African daughter Rasta.
I and I black sisters. I and I, whether woman or man, as I would say, we are one. These things I would take you. So don't come to cast no light upon the black African sisters. If you see them wrong and go astray, go teach them and lead them the ways I would say. And don't you come to call them no concubine. A concubine is a woman who got married and go astray without a man, as I would say. Black African sisters must be African sisters, whether they right or wrong, as I would say.
A less contentious interaction with another DJ would occur when Big Youth would team up with one of his own inspirations, the DJ godfather himself, U-Roy, as the two collaborated on a song called Battle of the Giants, combatively titled, but actually finds the two coming together in a spirit of love and unity, giving each other space to add their lyrics back and forth over a relaxed and soulful groove. As 1974 rolled into 1975, the tide had turned in reggae music. Rastafari and black consciousness were on the rise, and the image of the dreadlocked Rastaman, often sporting a gigantic spliff, became the new face and image of reggae music, with record labels capitalizing on that marketability factor, taking advantage of the vacuum created by the temporary demise of Trojan Records in the UK. Several other labels would arise to release Jamaican music there. One such was Click, which in 1975 would release Big Youth's Dreadlocks Dread, fully capitalizing on the image and the subject matter of Rastafari and dreadlocks. Big Youth, of course, having walked the walk and talked the talk for many years now. This is original press on Click Records. The album was later reissued by Virgin Records. This was produced by Prince Tony Robinson with backing by the Skin, Flesh and Bones band, engineered by Errol Thompson. Big Youth regarded it as incomplete as it was padded with some random dub versions, but it was a big seller on the reggae market. Lyrics of the Big Youth vocals entirely concerned with matters of dread, and sees him visit some of the most heavyweight rhythms, including Vivian Jackson, Yabby U's Conquering Lion, and his version of the seminal Marcus Garvey by Burning Spear, as well as celebrating the rise of natty culture on House of Dreadlocks.
You're tuned to Boss Radio, one on the land, with a temperature at 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Kind of warm in Kingston today, baby. Yeah.
Now we've learned what curly love is. What can you do more than love it?
Because the dread them love it, and then the daughter them a scrub it. The naughty dread them love it, and the sister them love it. Canati dreadlock dread, move ya down in the house of dread.
Big Youth's Dreadlocks Dread LP had been a major reggae seller in 1975 in the UK as Rastafarian content and imagery rose to the forefront of reggae music, inspiring a host of acts in Jamaica, in England, all over the world to take up the sound, the cause, and the message as their own. It would be followed in 1976 by a brace of Big Youth LPs released by a rejuvenated Trojan Records in the UK, comprising entirely Big Youth's own self-productions in Jamaica. Natty Cultural Dread would see the locks, the spliff, the title, all on point for 1976 reggae albums on Trojan Records. A return to Trojan after his initial foray on the with the Screaming Target LP of a few years before would lead off with Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, Big Youth's blistering cut of the Desi Roots Warning rhythm track, which he'd released as a single on his Augustus Buchanan label in Jamaica. Jam Tone sound system copy there. Finds Big Youth decrying violence. How you like someone do this to your mother, he sneers at the person he's addressing who is thinking of committing some sort of act against his fellow human. Elsewhere would include a couple of Big Youth's maybe questionable singing versions, Touch Me in the Morning, as well as his big hit from the blaxploitation soundtrack. Jim Squashy, otherwise known as Jim Screechy, finds him freely borrowing from The Last Poets. He had been listening to the This Is Madness LP and liberally borrows from their lyrics, incorporating the John Coltrane Died in Vain of a Love Supreme line, as well as adapting the Mean Machine chant of Automatic Pistol Remote Control. The This Is Madness chant itself would crop up on a later song by Big Youth called Political Confusion, decrying just that state, both at home in Jamaica and abroad. I Light and I Salvation would find Big Youth at his most fervently spiritual, lyrics flowing from his mouth like a preacher feeling the spirit as he declares his faith and devotion to Rastafari. Both these albums, big sellers on the UK market at the time. The next one, released the same year, would be Hit the Road Jack, also released on Trojan. Titled after Big Youth's liberal adaptation of Ray Charles's hit of the same name, where he randomly drops in the chorus of Burt Bacharach and Hal David's What the World Needs Now is Love right in the middle. One of his most ebullient, exuberant vocal performances, and a deserved big hit for Big Youth, as well as that song. He includes 3 cuts of a rhythm track that he had produced with singer Leroy Smart, who recorded Keep On Trying on it. Big Youth puts not 1, not 2, but 3 of his own versions of that rhythm track on this album, with Dread High Ranking being the first, Jawman of Cyrene, a more gospel-influenced version of it, and then Hotter Fire with its sound effects and sirens. Big Youth blurring distinctions left, right, and center, mixing up different styles of music. He was unquestionably one of the top artists at the time, rivaling Bob Marley in popularity. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll leave you with some clips, and my look at Big Youth will conclude next time.
The fool had said in his heart there is no God, but fool and corrupt are they, cause they know not neither do they understand, as I would say. Y'all walk in dark while I and I sons of Rastafari in the way of light. Because they got no sense, so they deal in violence, they shall surely go in silence. Say you're gone, but already move ya, and then you done it already. When I say you're gone, but already, and then you done it already. Got from the mark to the cemetery, move. I'm well said, and I'm daddy gone mad. So the little children soon be said it's a road jack. What the world needs now is a love, sweet love. It's the only thing that can live to be loved. What the world needs now is a love, sweet love. No, not just for self, but for everyone. It's a road that don't wanna come back no more, no more, no more, no more. It's a road that don't wanna come back no more. Siren, someone of Siren. Siren, someone of Siren. The papa died with a staff in his hand. Me papa died with a staff in his hand. And when I reach the other side, I'm gonna hold on to John. Me papa died with a staff.